Good afternoon. Thank you for taking your lunch break with me. It's Lunch with Lisa. It is episode 42. It is beautiful out. So I'm hoping you all go back to work after this, maybe, or maybe just take the rest of the day off. But thank you for finding us here live on YouTube, our new permanent home. And the great thing is that you can subscribe. You can know when new guests are being booked onto the show. You can set reminders and share it with your friends. And again, thank you so much for being here today. We are thrilled to welcome Jas Boothe to the show today and share her story and her mission to help homeless women veterans find safe and secure safe and secure housing. And this is all part of our week honoring veterans this Memorial Day week. Jas is a disabled U.S. Army veteran, a cancer survivor, an award-winning speaker who's been even recognized by Oprah, and I want to hear all about that. You served in the military for more than 17 years. You have an inspiring mission, and you're dedicated to advocating for soldiers and their families through your work with Final Salute. Thank you for being here today. And really, I love that. Served like a girl. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I think it takes a special person to want to be in the military, particularly a woman. What made you decide that that was what you were going to do?
Well, I joined the military after college, and by that time, I was a single mother. And
Mhm.
I've never liked the derogatory connotations that came with the term single mother. And so I let my son know that it was just a word, and
Mhm.
that's not indicative of how successful you can be in life. And so I wanted to take on a very challenging career, pick something like one of the hardest things that you could do and be successful at to show him what I am capable of as his mother. And the military just seemed like the natural fit.
Wow. And 17 years in the military.
Yes.
What was that like? I know that sounds so generic, but give us an idea of what did you do when you were in the military, in the Army?
Oh, yes. Well, I started off as a truck driver and then I commissioned and I spent the majority of my career as a human resources officer, which probably led me into my advocacy later on in my life. But I've always been pushed towards helping people, um, just being there for people in general. I mean, it definitely had its ups and downs. There's still sexism that exists. There's still racism that exists. I know people think of the military as its own little community that's not touched by American society. But I tell people the ills that we face in American society are still facing the military, as we talk about, you just recently talked about military sexual trauma, where we know we have a lot of that happening in the civilian world too. So it's a
Mhm.
lot of intersectionality, but I just want people to know that, yes, being in the military as a woman does not camouflage you from the ills that still come with being a woman. So along with your career, you still have to navigate, some of those unfortunate areas.
Sure. And when you left, I always think again of such honor and such respect for those who've served our country, who've been there to protect us. And those aren't just words. So when you left, I think you found that it wasn't the same experience as you might have thought, and that veterans are experiencing all sorts of issues that we need to be thinking about as civilians.
Yeah, I started my advocacy with Final Salute from my own experience with homelessness
Mhm.
when I was a lieutenant headed on a deployment to Iraq. Didn't make it due to two unfortunate events that happened within a month of each other. The first one was Hurricane Katrina, and the second one was a head, neck, and throat cancer diagnosis. And both of those basically knocked me on my feet. But was really interesting and a shock to the situation was a lack of supportive housing for homeless women veterans, specifically with children. And that's what made me aware of that void in the veteran support system.
So I just want to back up a little bit. So you were being deployed to Iraq, but you get a diagnosis of cancer, and then you're homeless because you don't go to Iraq. So I'm confused as to how that happens. Can you help me understand that?
Well, I was stationed at the Naval Support Activity and living in New Orleans. So, of course, Hurricane Katrina happened in New Orleans, and so that area was devastated.
Mhm.
So, I was still focused on my military mission. And then 30 days after Katrina hit is when the cancer diagnosis hit. So now
Right.
I can't deploy and there's no unit to go back to. But in between that, I need complex medical care because I had a rare but aggressive form of cancer. And so during that time, I was homeless and the hospital was my address.
Well, wow, that's a lot. And as many know, we're managing with that in my family right now. My father has cancer, so I know how hard it is to go through that, and how terrific that you're healthy now. But that must have been a very hard time.
It was a tough time because it was something that I went through alone, and I had to be separated from my child during that time. He stayed with my aunt, so it's when you talk about cancer and the illnesses, it's great to have a support system and a family that's there with you. But I would say the hardest part of that was going through it alone, which then I developed, major depressive disorder, which I still have today, and other, mental and psychological type issues. But it's one of those things that it just the effects of it stays with you. And so like people who have cancer, if they survive it, they will be survivors, for the rest of their life, whether it's side effects from the radiation therapy, the chemo, having to lose something to save your life. It's just one of those things that every day that there's a reminder.
Right. So with that, is that when you started public speaking? Like,
I
how do you find that? That's a calling, right? To be an advocate like that?
Well, so ironically, so I am born and raised Chicago, and so like Oprah is a staple. She's a staple, period. But because she got her big start and got really popular in Chicago, we used to always watch the Oprah show when I was younger, and so by the
We
time,
we still do.
yeah, so by the time I moved up to the DC area, she's getting ready to go off the air. It's around 2009. And I took leave to catch one of her last shows. And on her show, she had a homeless woman veteran. And so this is like now 5 years or so removed from my situation. And I was like, what, this is still an issue, or this is really an issue? And from her show, I decided to go do a little research to see, well, maybe things have changed since my situation. And I looked up resources, housing, all types of support systems for homeless women veterans. And then Not a Hit came up. And I'm like, you have to be, is profanity okay? Sometimes I tend to curse. I'm
Go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
You have to be shitting me. And so I guess you can say at that point that I had my aha moment. And, I think traditionally and subconsciously, we're always saying when we see a problem, somebody is going to do something about that. And I said, you know what? You're going to be that somebody. And so that's when I started my advocacy. I never thought to get into public speaking, but I was talking about the things that were going on with homeless women veterans. But everyone was like, you need to tell your story because that experience will connect and resonate with people. And so that's how I kind of got into public speaking.
Wow. And then with the public speaking, you're able to reach out to people and create awareness. We talked about the fact that there's a lot of PR around veterans and around our flag and patriotism. Thoughts on that? How does that relate to the real life of being a veteran?
It's for sometimes it's night and day, and unfortunately whenever there's an election or something coming up, veterans are used as, political fodder. That's just what it is. And you talk about the kneeling and not saluting the flag and the things like that. Those are the freedoms that we fought for. It doesn't hurt me if you don't, salute the flag or if you kneel, because that's your right to do. That's your freedom of expression, your freedom of speech. But I've been to football games and baseball games, and while the national anthem is playing, people are still ordering hot dogs at the concession stand. People are still getting beer. So I'm like, why are the players held to another standard? They're forced. I don't want to force anybody to have to be patriotic or salute or do or anything. And to me, forced patriotism isn't really patriotism. But you just can't look at what's happening on the field. You have to look at what's happening off the field, and what those people who are angry about the kneelers are the same people who are still getting their beers and getting their hot dogs. So, you can't be hypocritical on one side because you don't agree with the way someone is expressing their protests, especially when it's a peaceful protest. We've seen violent protests across this country. I would rather things be done, with peace and without anyone getting hurt. But again, that's the right that I fought for. That's the right that me and my brothers and sisters fought for. But what we don't like, again, is to be used, as a sexy news story. And then those same people walk past the veterans on their way to those football and baseball games while they're sitting outside with their signs saying homeless and hungry.
Right.
It's just, I see it from all different angles, and it gets very frustrating.
That they're walking right by people who've served their country, but then they're up in arms about a kneeling athlete, right?
Exactly.
Gotta get our priorities a little straightened out there. When you were talking to me, I have been on the board of Housing Families in Boston for 12 years, very familiar with the challenges that families go through. And we work with men and women who have children. So you're only at Housing Families if you have a child. And with that, I'm always amazed that this is a problem that we're having such a challenge overcoming. Women veterans, you said, have an even bigger challenge. And we're sending our women off to fight in a war. They have children at home. We're not taking care of them when we get home. Tell me a little bit more about that, because why I didn't quite think about it in that way too. It caused me to call over to Housing Families and say, do we have veterans who are currently serving? And I want to know more about that. So tell me about that.
Well, I see a question that popped up here and said, what's the biggest discrepancy in how women veterans are treated versus men? Well, when we're looking from a housing standpoint, the Government Accountability Office did not track women veterans as a homeless population until 2010.
Did they all as one or not at
They
all?
didn't track them at all. They didn't track them at all. So they were not even on the radar as far as a population that needed supportive housing. And that's a problem because that's only 10 years ago. And then for some of the programs that did take in women, they didn't take in women with children, or they could only have a certain number of children, or the children had to be a certain gender. It was just like so many stipulations. And they also thought, okay, well, maybe it's a great idea to co-house, men and women veterans. That's a bad idea because, hey, it's different when I'm, living with the guys that I serve with, but
Right.
they were housing women and children with registered male sex offenders, and so it's those type of things to say, well, no, it's not good enough to just have housing. It needs to be safe and secure, which is why we pride ourselves on that for Final Salute. But another bigger discrepancy is over 70 to 80% of homeless women veterans are single mothers. And so that's the biggest discrepancy overall.
And why do you think that is? And what have you done to help change that?
Why do I think they're single mothers?
No. Why do you think that so many of these soldiers have been forgotten
I
after?
think I think they have been forgotten because of how war fighters are portrayed on the media. You always see the men fighting Kerry and his brother doing X, Y, and Z, but you never see the women that are engaged in the fight, the women that are on the front line. So I think America has they don't fully understand our service and our sacrifice. I have a good friend named Marissa Strock who is a double amputee. We were at a Memorial Day event a few years ago, and they had about 10 wounded warriors that were lined up, and there were some high up mucky mucks, shaking their hand, thanking them for their service. She's at the end of the line, sitting there in a wheelchair with no legs. They're shaking the guy's hand. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice. Give them all the praise. They get to her and say, well, what happened to you? She's sitting there in a wheelchair. Back of the wheelchair says Purple Heart. She's a veteran. She's obviously there with the rest of the wounded warriors, but they can't make that connection if she's lost both her legs to an IED because she is a woman. So it's those types of things that people are not aware of. I'm very good friends with Master Sergeant Tara Jacob Brown father. She was killed overseas in action. She was the only woman that was lined up with, I think, 7 or 8 of her military Air Force brothers. They were all executed. He didn't, the terrorists that killed her didn't say, hey, you can go because you're a woman, and she raised her right hand. We all do. We all accept the same service and sacrifice. But nobody really talks about it. Nobody really shows the depth of it. And we're right there in the trenches. When you are in Iraq and Afghanistan, there are no front lines and there are no gender lines, regardless of what your jobs are. IUDs do not gender discriminate, and we need to get to a veteran support system that doesn't either.
It's interesting when you talk about the media. It makes me think about the Me Too movement, right? Where how much of Hollywood finally made major changes in how women were cast and treated. And, so many women producers were able to really come out with thought-provoking films that may not have been able to prior to that. So it sounds like there's an opportunity with the media to change the bias that they have with our military. Would that help people maybe more understand? Or is it that we all just have an obligation and a responsibility to pay closer attention?
Well, I think, obviously the media they're able to reach more people, but I think they should be fair in the stories, fair in their reporting, fair in their experiences. Like when you see a lot of commercial for veteran organizations or for or people or celebrities who are supporting veterans, they always have the male veteran that's there with his wife and kids and showing how loving and connected they are. They don't come to my house as a female veteran and show me and my husband and my kids and how loving and connected we are. So again, there's this connection that women veterans who are experiencing, disabilities or struggles, that we're just out here floundering, we're damsels in distress. No, we're loved. We have support systems, and it's just, it's just the imagery of how it's portrayed. I can shoot expert, with my weapon. I have had 2 knee replacements. I've had a spinal fusion because I carried my same load. I ran my same load. I rucked, I marched alongside my brothers. So, I believe they think we leave the military unscathed. And
Right.
that's just not, the truth. So I think that the truth needs to be evenly and open, and the media stories need to share the vast array of men and women's stories and struggles.
Speaking of media, I think it's fascinating that Oprah helped kick you off in finding your voice. I think she's helped so many people do that, and we all look up to Oprah. Not all of us have actually been recognized by Oprah. What can you tell us that story? What was that like to be recognized by Oprah for your work?
All right, so I got reached out by a member of her team, and they were like, Oprah's doing the Life You Want tour, and they're just gonna honor some people who are doing great things in the DC metro area, and she wants to give you a couple of tickets to come. And they're like, yeah, we'll send a crew to look at the home and just to see how everything's run, make sure everything is legit. But I didn't know they were like,
Like, hi, this is Oprah's crew. Like, does that just come out of nowhere?
Yeah, well, at first I thought they were playing. I was like, I don't know who is this on my phone. I do not have time for this. And they're like, no, this is such and such, and we're with. And I was just like, all right, I'll play along. so I so I did. I know, right? So I did get the tickets, and we go. And I'm with one of the ladies that resided in that transitional home, and the lady on the stage, Amy Purdy was there with her. And Oprah goes, we're here to honor a bold woman from Washington, D.C. Where is Jas Boothe? And I'm clapping and I'm like, yeah, where is Jas Boothe? And my friend was like, bitch, that's you. And I was like, oh my
Oh my God, how could you do there? Is that the of like a lifetime?
Yeah, and I'm so glad that I dressed up and I didn't wear jeans and a t-shirt that day. But, I always talk about, how everything came full circle, because it was through watching the Oprah show that made me realize that, hey, this is a problem. It's still a problem. And
Right.
it's something that nobody, is doing anything about. And I didn't reach out to Oprah and say, hey, Oprah, I started an organization, give me money, write me a check. I think of some people like, they like, I need to get noticed by somebody big. And I say, hey, I tell people all the time that are starting nonprofits, you do the work. Believe me, people are watching that you would not think that you existed in the world. So just keep doing the work.
Right.
And, they like, same if you build it, they will come. And so, yeah, she's reached out to me, and I've done so much amazing media on behalf of homeless women, veterans, and their children that I think has definitely helped the movement, and to raise the profile.
That's amazing. And we're, of course, also thankful for what you do. And again, of course, for serving our country. Someone on the side here has asked, what can we do to support your work? And what a great way to wrap up today's 25-minute lunch with Lisa. And again, thank you for coming on. What can everybody who's watching this do to help support what you do? And all the people who need us.
Right. Well, if you know of a woman veteran, thank her for her service. You can always donate to our site at finalsaluteinc.org. And also right now we're running a virtual race. It's called Move with a Purpose. You can pick any distance. You can bike it, walk it, jog it, swim it, stationary bike it, treadmill or whatever you need to do to keep socially distanced and get moving. Move with a Purpose is a term we use in the military that means, hey, we need to get stuff done. COVID has affected women veterans, as well. Some have lost their jobs because they were offered jobs and they were lost their jobs, or some have lost income. And so we're doing this Move with a Purpose virtual race to raise money for them and help them stay in their homes. There's not a lot of ways to test, right now for everybody to get testing. And so shelters and other places like that really can't take in, new residents for fear of the current residents getting sick. And so the best thing to do right now is to keep them in their homes. And that's our main mission right now.
Great. That's wonderful. I know that I need to get out and get running. So I think that I'm going to challenge my team to see what can we do as a team to support what you're doing. I think that would be terrific. Thank you so much for coming on. And this video is live, but will be available immediately. So I'm hoping that everybody who's watching will share. And again, thank another woman veteran that you know. If there's anything else we can do, you be in touch, and we're here to help you out.
Will do. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone that chimed in.
So thank you, everyone, for watching again today. We have 2 more inspiring guests the rest of the week. Be sure to subscribe below. Subscribe so you know everybody who's coming on. And you can find us on the new Live with Lisa social media. It's Live with Lisa on Facebook, Live with Lisa Show on Instagram. We'll be posting behind the scenes. We'll be posting interesting information about our upcoming guests, our past guests, reminding you of some of the great shows that we've had. The other thing I want to share is I'm really passionate about women-owned business, women's enterprise, women entrepreneurs. And I always try and wear women-owned clothing, women-owned jewelry, women designed. And so we'll be posting up the different clothes, the different jewelry that I'm wearing and where you can get it, because it's our opportunity to put our money where our mouth is. Right? If we spend our money with purpose, we can easily support so many more people around us. The big generic brands don't need our help, but all those artists and people that have small business in America do. And so we're looking for more women that we can help support and promote on this show. And if that's one more way that we can do it, that's what we're going to do. We're going to put our money where, WEAR, our mouth is. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you again tomorrow.